Early anarchist prisoners, when belief became a crime in America. Some stories were buried on purpose. Some voices were silenced behind prison walls. What you're about to hear is real, forgotten, and unsettling. Subscribe now, because history like this was never meant to be remembered. The cell door slammed shut with a sound so loud it felt like a gunshot. Iron echoed through the stone hallway as the guard turned the key and walked away without looking back. Inside the dark cell, a man stood frozen, his hands still shaking. He had not thrown a bomb, he had not killed anyone, he had not even planned an attack. His crime was something harder to see and much easier to fear. He believed the government should not exist. Outside the prison walls, crowds were already whispering his name. Newspapers called him dangerous. Politicians called him a threat. Police called him an example. Inside the cell, there was only silence, cold stone, and the growing understanding that in America, ideas could put you in chains. And this was only the beginning, because this arrest would open the door to something new and terrifying, a time when belief itself became enough to destroy a life. What followed would change prisons forever. But to understand how America reached this moment, we must go back to a nation still bleeding from war. After the Civil War ended, the United States was broken but rebuilding fast. Factories rose where fields once stood. Railroads cut through towns like iron knives. Cities filled with workers, immigrants, veterans, widows, and children, all chasing survival. The rich grew richer, the poor grew desperate. Long hours, unsafe factories, wages that barely fed a family. Workers were crushed by machines and replaced without apology. When they complained, they were told to be grateful they had jobs at all. Out of this pain, new ideas began to grow. Some workers believed the system could be fixed. Others believed it was rotten to the core. A small but growing group reached a dangerous conclusion that government itself was the problem. These people called themselves anarchists. To them, rulers were tyrants, laws were chains, and prisons were tools of control. They believed people should govern themselves, without kings, without presidents, without police. In the 1870s, this belief terrified America. Anarchism came from Europe, carried across the ocean by immigrants fleeing hunger, war, and failed revolutions. Many had seen governments crush the poor before. They brought stories, anger, and hope with them. At first, anarchists met quietly. They held meetings in basements and back rooms. They printed pamphlets. They gave speeches in parks. Most spoke of freedom, fairness, and dignity. But fear does not care about details. To factory owners and politicians, anarchists looked like fire waiting for a spark. And that spark came in 1877. That year, the nation exploded. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 spread like wildfire across the country. Rail workers walked off the job after wages were cut again and again. Trains stopped, cities froze, crowds gathered, anger spilled into the streets. In some places, buildings burned, trains were destroyed, soldiers fired into crowds, dozens died. The government panicked. They did not fully understand the strike, but they knew who to blame: radicals, foreigners, anarchists.
Police raided meeting halls, they broke down doors, they seized papers and books. Men were dragged from their homes in the middle of the night. Many arrested had not taken part in violence. Some weren't even at the strikes, but they shared ideas, and that was enough. Courts were quick, evidence was thin. Judges allowed speeches and writings to be treated as proof of danger. This was new. Before this moment, prisons were mostly for thieves, killers, and criminals of action. Now they were being used for criminals of thought. Men were locked up for what they believed might happen. Inside the prisons, anarchist inmates were treated as especially dangerous. Guards watched them closely. Letters were censored. Visits were limited. Some were placed in isolation for weeks at a time. The goal was not just punishment, it was silence. Officials believed that if anarchist voices disappeared behind stone walls, the ideas would die with them. But prisons have a way of doing the opposite. Behind bars, anarchists talked, they wrote, they debated, they shared stories of arrests without cause and trials without fairness. Prison became a place where belief hardened instead of fading. And outside the walls, something else was happening. Newspapers printed terrifying headlines. They warned that anarchists wanted to destroy America. Politicians used fear to gain votes. Police asked for more power. More arrests followed. Each imprisonment made the idea of political prisoners more real. By the late 1870s, America had crossed a quiet line. It was now acceptable to jail people, not for what they had done, but for what they might believe. The man in the cell felt it every night. He listened to the sounds of other inmates, thieves, drunks, laborers, and knew his cage was different. He had no victim, no stolen goods, no blood on his hands, only words. And yet the guards treated him like a bomb waiting to explode. He scratched messages into the wall with a nail. Simple thoughts, simple hopes, freedom, justice, truth. He did not know if he would ever leave. What he didn't know was that his imprisonment was helping shape a future where prisons would become weapons against ideology, a future where belief itself could be labeled terrorism. And soon, America's fear would grow even larger, because the prisons were filling up, and the government was just getting started. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, the crackdown deepens, and the line between justice and oppression begins to disappear. The screams started before sunrise. A prison bell rang hard and fast, not to wake the men, but to warn them. Guards rushed down the stone hallway with clubs in their hands. Doors flew open, names were shouted, men were dragged out of cells without time to put on shoes. One prisoner was still bleeding from the night before when they pulled him into the light. This was not a riot. This was a purge.
Across the country in the late 1870s, prisons were changing. They were no longer just holding criminals who had stolen or killed. Now they held men accused of something invisible, dangerous ideas. Anarchists. Officials claimed these prisoners were planning violence, but when the cells were searched, guards found no bombs, no weapons, only papers, letters, and books. That made the fear worse, because words could spread. Inside the prison, the anarchist prisoners were separated from the others. They were placed in colder cells. Meals were smaller. Talking was punished. Guards were ordered to listen closely to every whisper. The state believed these men were leaders, even when they had no followers. One prisoner, a printer by trade, had been arrested for running a small newspaper. His paper never called for violence. It criticized factories. It questioned police power. It spoke about freedom. That
was enough. In court, prosecutors read his articles aloud as if they were murder weapons. The jury did not understand the words fully, but they understood fear. He was sentenced to years behind bars. When he arrived at prison, the warden told him the truth without shame. "You are not here for what you did," the warden said. "You are here for what you might cause." This thinking spread fast. After the railroad strike of 1877, cities were tense. Soldiers had been used against citizens. Blood had stained the streets. The government wanted control back, and prisons became their strongest tool. Police began watching meetings. Informants were planted in worker groups. Men were arrested based on rumors and conversations overheard in taverns. Some anarchists were jailed for conspiracy without any clear plan. Others were charged with inciting unrest, even if no unrest followed. Once inside prison, they vanished from public view. Families waited for letters that never came. Children grew up not knowing why their fathers were gone. Wives were told to keep quiet or risk arrest themselves. Silence became survival. But inside the walls, silence broke. In whispered conversations through cell cracks, anarchist prisoners shared stories. One man had been arrested for translating a pamphlet, another for attending a meeting, another for refusing to name others. They realized something chilling. The prison did not care if they were guilty. It cared if they were useful as warnings. Guards used them to scare others. "This is what happens to troublemakers," they said. "This is what happens to thinkers." Isolation was the worst punishment. Some anarchist prisoners were kept alone for weeks. No talking, no books, no light. The mind became the enemy. Men talked to walls. Some forgot days. Some forgot their own names. The state believed isolation would break belief. Sometimes it did. One prisoner begged to renounce anarchism just to feel the sun again. Another pretended to agree, only to be watched forever. A few lost hope completely. But others grew stronger. They memorized ideas. They repeated them in their heads like prayers. They believed suffering proved the system was afraid. Outside the prisons, fear was spreading too. Newspapers warned of secret plots. Politicians spoke of hidden enemies. Immigrants were watched closely. Police gained more power. America was learning something dangerous, that fear could be managed through cages. And prisons were learning something new, that political prisoners were different. They did not see themselves as criminals. They saw themselves as prisoners of conscience. This scared the authorities more than violence ever could. In some prisons, wardens ordered anarchist inmates to be punished more harshly than thieves or killers. The logic was simple. A thief could steal once, an idea could spread forever. By the end of the decade, arrests increased. Courts stretched laws to fit fear. Juries were told that anarchism itself was a threat to society. No bomb was needed, no blood was required. Belief was the crime. One night, a prisoner was taken from his cell and never returned. Guards said he had been transferred. Others knew better. They had heard the screams. They had seen the blood on the floor the next morning. The message was clear. Think quietly or disappear. But something unexpected was happening. The more the state tried to erase anarchists, the more attention they gained. Writers spoke about political prisoners. Workers whispered names. Prison stories leaked out. People began to ask uncomfortable questions. If a man could be jailed for ideas, who was truly free? The government felt the pressure, and instead of stepping back, it pushed harder. New laws were discussed, more surveillance, more arrests, less proof. Prison was no longer just a punishment. It was becoming policy. And soon, one event would push America's fear of anarchists to a breaking point, an event that would convince the nation that belief and violence were the same thing, an event that would reshape prisons forever. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, fear turns into full-scale repression, and the line between justice and terror vanishes completely. The prison yard went silent the moment the news arrived. Men stopped walking, guards stopped talking, even the wind seemed to pause. A single newspaper had made its way inside, folded and passed hand to hand until it reached the anarchist cells. The headlines said everything the government had been waiting for. Violence. An attack had happened outside the prison walls, not by the men inside, but by someone who believed what they believed. The details were still unclear, but it did not matter. The fear had found its proof. And now every anarchist prisoner knew what was coming next. Before the sun set, the punishments began. Cells were searched again, this time with rage instead of caution. Papers were ripped apart, books were thrown into fires. One man tried to protect a handwritten letter from his child and was beaten for it. Guards no longer whispered about danger, they spoke openly. "This is why you're here," one guard said. "This is what your ideas do." Inside the prison, guilt no longer needed to be proven, it was assumed. Outside, America was changing fast. The late 1870s were full of fear. Cities were crowded, jobs were scarce, workers were angry. The memory of strikes and riots still burned in the public mind. When violence appeared even far away, people wanted someone to blame. Anarchists were the perfect target. They were different. Many spoke with accents. Many questioned authority. Many refused to swear loyalty to any flag. Newspapers painted them as monsters hiding behind words. The public listened.
Politicians spoke about order. Police asked for more power. Judges promised safety, and prisons expanded quietly to make room. Inside the cells, anarchist prisoners felt the shift immediately. Visits were canceled, letters stopped. Some men were moved in the middle of the night to unknown locations. No explanations were given, no records were shared. It was as if they were being erased. One prisoner, a teacher before his arrest, noticed something chilling. New inmates were arriving, but they were not criminals. They were speakers, writers, organizers, men whose only weapon had been their voice. Trials became shorter, evidence became thinner. In some cases, belief alone was enough for a sentence. Judges spoke about preventing danger instead of proving guilt. This was new territory. America was no longer waiting for crime, it was locking people up to stop it from ever happening. Prison officials created special rules for anarchists. Group gatherings were banned. Talking during labor was forbidden. Anyone caught sharing ideas was punished. The goal was simple: break the chain of thought. But prisons are strange places. When bodies are trapped, minds wander further. Men memorized speeches they had once heard. They told stories through walls. They tapped messages through pipes. Ideas survived in pieces, and fear continued to grow. One night, a fight broke out in the yard between guards and inmates. It started small, a shove, a shout. Then clubs came down hard. Blood hit the dirt. The next morning, anarchist prisoners were blamed. None had been involved. It did not matter. Several were taken away for questioning. Hours passed, then days. Only one returned. He walked differently. He did not speak. His eyes never focused. No one asked what happened. They already knew. News spread outside the prisons were holding the line. The dangerous men were being controlled.
The public felt safer believing that. But safety came at a price. Families of prisoners protested quietly and were ignored. Lawyers tried to challenge arrests and were blocked. Courts ruled that extraordinary times required extraordinary measures. Fear had rewritten the rules. By the end of the decade, America had created something it had never openly admitted before: political prisoners. Men locked up not for crimes, but for beliefs labeled dangerous. And the system was learning quickly. Prisons became tools not just for punishment, but for prevention. Surveillance expanded, informants were rewarded, communities were divided by suspicion. Trust faded. The anarchist prisoners felt it deeply. Some lost faith, some clung harder to their beliefs, some broke completely. A few died behind bars, their names never printed, their stories never told. But their imprisonment left a mark. Years later, when new waves of fear came, the blueprint already existed. Arrest first, explain later, silence dissent. Use prisons as shields against uncertainty. It all began here, in cold cells, with frightened judges, and a nation choosing control over understanding. The prison yard never fully recovered its sound. Even after the fear moved on, the silence stayed. And the lesson was clear. Once a country learns how to imprison ideas, it never forgets how to do it again. Stay with me, because the story does not end here. The legacy of these early anarchist prisoners would echo far beyond the 1870s, shaping every future battle between fear, freedom, and the prison walls. The first body was found at dawn. A prison worker noticed the stillness during morning count. One inmate did not move. His blanket was folded too neatly around him. When guards pulled it back, his face was pale, his eyes open, staring at nothing. No riot, no attack, no warning. The official report said illness. The prisoners knew better. He had been one of the quiet ones, an anarchist who stopped speaking after weeks in isolation. He had once believed that ideas could not be killed. Now his body lay cold on a stone floor, proof that prisons did not need violence to destroy a man. Word spread fast through whispers and tapping on walls. Another one is gone. By the end of the 1870s, this had become normal. Anarchist prisoners disappeared quietly. Some were transferred, some were released without explanation, some died and were buried without names. Records were lost, files went missing. Silence protected everyone except the dead. Outside the prison walls, America moved on. Factories kept running, railroads stretched farther west. Politicians spoke of peace and progress. Most people never thought about the men locked away for ideas they barely understood. That was the point. The system had learned how to hide political imprisonment behind routine. Prisons did not announce they were holding anarchists. They called them agitators, troublemakers, conspirators. The labels shifted, but the purpose stayed the same. Control fear, silence doubt, protect power. Inside, the remaining prisoners felt the weight of time. Years passed slowly, days blurred together. Hope became dangerous because it hurt too much when it faded. Some men were offered deals. Renounce your beliefs, sign a statement, publicly regret your ideas. A few did. They were released early, watched closely, broken in quiet ways. They rarely spoke again. When they did, their voices sounded empty. Others refused. Those men stayed. They became examples, warnings, shadows. One aging prisoner carved a final message into his cell wall before he died. Guards tried to scrub it away, but the scratches remained. You can cage bodies, not truth.
No one knows how many read it. As the decade closed, the government declared victory. Anarchism, they said, had been contained. The threat was under control. But ideas do not die in prisons. They wait. The methods used in the 1870s did not disappear. They were studied, improved, quietly reused when fear returned. Later generations would see the same pattern: new enemies, new names, same cells. What happened to the early anarchist prisoners became a blueprint. Arrest first, explain later, call it protection, and prisons would always be ready. The men who suffered in the 1870s were rarely remembered. Their names faded, their faces were lost, but their impact remained, locked into the walls of every prison built after them. They proved something the state never wanted to admit: that fear can turn freedom into a crime. And once that line is crossed, it is almost impossible to erase. The prison worker who found the body that morning never spoke about it again. He finished his shift, he went home. Life continued. That's how systems survive. Quietly.
The cell door still echoes when it closes, and somewhere, even now, a belief waits to be judged. If you want to understand how prisons shape power, how fear reshapes justice, and how history repeats itself behind locked doors, stay with this story, because the past is never as far away as we think. The knock came years later. It was not loud. It did not need to be. By then, everyone understood what a knock like that meant. It came before sunrise, when fear was easiest to carry and hardest to fight. A man opened his door and saw two officers standing in the cold. They did not accuse him of a crime. They did not read a charge. They asked only one question: do you still believe what you used to believe? That question was the true legacy of the early anarchist prisoners. By the time the 1880s approached, the prisons of the 1870s had already done their work. America had learned how to turn belief into suspicion, suspicion into danger, and danger into imprisonment. The system no longer needed riots or strikes to react. It moved ahead of them. People felt it in their bones. Meetings grew smaller. Words were chosen carefully. Friends stopped trusting friends. Silence became a shield. Former prisoners walked free but never escaped. Many were watched for years. Police followed them to jobs. Landlords were warned. Employers were pressured. A prison sentence ended, but punishment did not. Some tried to speak again. When they did, newspapers reminded the public who they were. Former anarchist prisoner, the headline said. Not citizen, not worker, not human first. The label stuck. The state did not need to arrest everyone anymore. The fear did the work on its own. Children of prisoners felt it too. Schools treated them differently. Neighbors avoided them. The message was clear even to the young. Ideas could ruin families. Inside the prisons, the damage lasted longer than sentences. Men released after years of isolation struggled to speak in crowds. Some avoided sunlight. Some woke screaming from dreams of locked doors and endless walls. They had survived incarceration, but their minds had been shaped by it. That was the real success of the system. Not broken laws, broken spirits. Yet history has a strange habit of refusing to stay buried. Writings smuggled out of prisons began to circulate. Letters written in tiny script, stories whispered and rewritten. People who never met the prisoners started asking questions. Why were they arrested? What proof was used? What threat had they truly posed? These questions made officials uncomfortable because the answers were thin. No bomb, no coordinated attack, no clear plan, only fear. Slowly, a few journalists began to look back. They read old court records. They noticed patterns. Arrests clustered around unrest.
charges vague, sentences harsh. They used a word America hated to hear: political prisoners. The government pushed back. Officials insisted prisons were neutral, that laws were fair, that danger had been real. But doubt had already slipped through the cracks, and doubt is harder to cage than anger. The early anarchist prisoners never saw this shift. Most were dead or forgotten by the time questions grew louder. But their suffering had planted something that could not be erased. A warning that prisons, once used against belief, rarely return to innocence. The techniques tested in the 1870s were reused again and again. During labor movements, during wars, during moments of national fear. Each time, the story sounded familiar. We must act now. This is different. It is for safety. And each time, cells filled quietly. Looking back, the early anarchist prisoners were not powerful. They did not control armies or money. They had no offices, no weapons. What they had was belief, and that alone scared a nation enough to lock them away. That should matter. Because when a society decides ideas or crimes, it stops asking whether power is afraid. The prison doors of the 1870s closed on more than bodies. They closed on a promise America once made to itself, that thought would remain free even when action was punished. That promise cracked, and every generation since has lived with the echo. The story of early anarchist prisoners is not just about the past. It is about how easily fear rewrites justice, how quietly systems learn, how fast prisons adapt. It is about how freedom is not lost all at once, but cell by cell. The man who once stood shaking as the iron door slammed shut was not remembered in history books. No statue carries his name, no holiday honors his suffering, but his cell still speaks. It speaks in every law that punishes belief, every arrest made on suspicion, every prison built to protect power instead of people. And it asks a question that still has no easy answer. If belief can be a crime, who is truly free? If this story made you uneasy, that's the point. Stay with this channel, because the walls of history are closer than they seem, and the next knock is never as far away as we think. The last cell was empty.
The guard noticed it during evening rounds. The door was open. The bed was bare. The name that had once been written on a chalkboard outside the cell had been wiped away. No transfer papers, no release record, no explanation. This was how the story ended for many early anarchist prisoners, not with freedom, not with justice, but with disappearance. By the time the 1870s faded into history, the prisons had done their quiet work. The men who had once filled the cells were gone, but the system they helped create was stronger than ever. America did not celebrate this change. It barely noticed it. That was the most dangerous part. The government never announced that it had created political prisoners. It never said belief was illegal. Instead, it changed how words were used: threat, security, prevention. These words softened the truth. Courts began accepting fear as evidence. Police learned they did not need proof of action, only suspicion of intent. Prisons adjusted, becoming places not just to punish crime, but to manage ideas. And it worked. The public felt safer. Disorder seemed controlled. Radical voices faded from the streets. Silence looked like peace. But beneath that calm, something had shifted forever. The early anarchist prisoners left behind a lesson written in stone and iron. Once a state learns how to jail belief, it never fully forgets how. The tools remain ready, waiting for the next moment of fear. History would prove this again and again. New groups would be labeled dangerous. New ideas would be called threats. Each time, prisons would open their doors without question. The pattern was already set in the 1870s. Most of the men who suffered through it were never named in textbooks. Their trials were forgotten, their cells reused, their pain absorbed into routine. Yet their story matters, because they were not powerful men. They did not command armies. They did not control governments. They were workers, writers, printers, teachers, people who believed the world could be different. For that, they were caged. They showed how fear can turn neighbors into suspects and law into a weapon. They showed how easy it is to trade freedom for comfort when danger feels close. And they showed something else too, that ideas do not die in prison. They survive in memory, in warnings, in stories like this one. The empty cell at the end of the hallway was not a victory. It was a reminder that silence is not safety and control is not justice. The iron door still stands, the walls still remember, and every time a society chooses fear over freedom, those old cells quietly fill again. This is where the story ends, but the question it leaves behind does not. If belief can be treated as a crime, then freedom is never guaranteed, it is only borrowed, and history is always waiting to take it back. If this story made you think, it did its job. These prisons are gone, but the ideas behind them remain. More hidden truths are coming, one story at a time. Subscribe, stay curious, and never stop questioning power.